Okay. Welcome back to our 8th Star Wars retrospective, our last one before the Rise of Skywalker. I'm Gianni.
I'm Flynn.
I'm Sam.
And this is The Last Jedi, directed by Rian Johnson. Came out in 2017. And we all love it, but this is probably the most debated Star Wars movie in the history of Star Wars movies.
Yes.
I want to start off with Rian Johnson,
Oof.
and specifically, this is the biggest thing that he's tackled, right? Probably
Yes.
the biggest project of his career that he had tackled up until this point. And he's certainly a reliable director. He has a plethora of credits under his belt, so he's definitely someone who is worthy, I think, of directing a Star Wars film. But just the monumental task. I mean, I can imagine that you're faced with incredible excitement, but also painstaking fear when you're offered, a film as big as this one and a franchise as big as this one. And he has a sequel too. He has the sequel,
Yeah.
so definitely some shoes to fill.
Yeah,
for sure.
And it's him. He wrote and directed this
Right.
movie, joining George Lucas as the only people to do that. And speaking, as you said, to the credits of Rian Johnson before just jumping into it, he had a few episodes on Breaking Bad that kind of dictate where he would go in Last Jedi, because he has an episode like Fly that is completely different and subversive and not at all what you're expecting, and Ozymandias. And he uses those episodes of Breaking Bad to explore the characters in interesting ways, to dive into their psyches, to really challenge perceptions of things. And I think that along with Looper, which shows that he can play around in this science fiction world and create something really original and unique, sort of equipped him to be a great person to take on this task.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to talk about Rian Johnson's other big credit is Brick, which is an incredible character movie, which I think is something that J.J. Abrams absolutely excels at too, but to get to the real heart of these characters, you did need someone who can do that small indie character driven thing, and that was Rian Johnson. It was the perfect pick.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to describe The Last Jedi too. In a lot of ways, it feels like an indie kind of this smaller scale film than what it really is. And I think that's perfectly encapsulated with the character of Luke Skywalker. The directions that we go with his character, I think, are fitting. I think makes sense in the events and the world that's set up in The Force Awakens. And I don't know how this is not everyone's favorite thing about The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
But it's not,
Yeah, and in fact, it's a lot of people's least favorite thing about The Last Jedi, the way this movie handles Luke Skywalker. And I agree. I thought that it was completely consistent with what we know about Luke. I think, right off the bat, this is Mark Hamill's best performance as Luke Skywalker.
I agree.
Maybe his best performance of his career, point blank, period. Probably. And, it's consistent with what we learn in Force Awakens. We know that Han gives the breakdown in Force Awakens of what happened with less detail than we get in Last Jedi. We know that he sort of failed as a teacher and has isolated himself. So I don't understand why people went into this movie thinking that, Rey was gonna go to Ahch-To and Luke Skywalker was just gonna be like, oh boy, we're in it. I'm going right back. I got my green lightsaber and I'm gonna I just don't understand where people thought this movie was gonna take Luke Skywalker. I'm certainly glad that this movie didn't take Luke Skywalker to the places they thought he was going to go, because I much prefer what we got in Last Jedi.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Luke's my favorite character from the original trilogy. I feel like that's a kind of not common thing to hear. I think it's always Han or Leia or Vader. But saying that, I don't really like Return of the Jedi Luke, because he's kind of just he's a Jedi and he has no kind of emotions. But more importantly, at the end of the original series, Luke's still a kid.
Yeah.
He's 22 by the end of the end of the original series, and taking on the task of training new Jedi and also training your nephew when you know that he has dark side tendencies, which you just watched your father die to, had to have shaken him at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I just find everything about Luke so believable, and I love that he isolated himself and that he ran from like Han and Leia and didn't want to face that consequence. And I don't know, I love everything that they did with Luke in this movie.
Yeah.
I think it's perfect.
I think we touched on this in the Force Awakens about the sort of heartbreak that you feel in that film, and you certainly feel it here with Luke. Just the insane amount of regret that he is living with every day alone on this planet. And he shuts himself off from the Force in this film, too. We learn that when Rey tells him that Han is dead. Like, just the surprise on his face, the shock factor when he goes, "Where's Han?" Like, oh, you don't know.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, he definitely... He is the most interesting character in this film to me, because we see so much of what he hasn't been through. He hasn't been there for. He hasn't been there to see what Kylo Ren has actually become, or what's become of Leia and Han. It's really interesting things they do with Luke in this film specifically. But we also learn a lot more about Rey and Kylo too, and their connection.
Oh man.
And we talked a little bit about this also in the Force Awakens retrospective. And that the Force is used in so many interesting ways in this film, too. We've never seen a connection like this previously, the way that we see between Rey and Kylo, being able to kind of see each other and be in the same place, but be in different places at the same time. That was really interesting, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's it's Star Wars to learn new properties and new powers of the Force. So to think that... I think some people were angry about the Force connection that Kylo and Rey shared, and they sort of thought that this wasn't really how the Force worked before. But like each movie compounds on what we know about the Force and how it can be utilized. And as something, like we sort of talked about, as something that's been described as an energy that binds all living things, like I don't know how you can just take that at face value and think that the Force is one thing that belongs to one type of person.
Yeah, and explicitly, I think Rian Johnson described what Rey and Kylo were doing as a Force bond, because they like, were in each other's heads for a good time there in Force Awakens. And the Force bond, a nerd, the Force bond is something that's actually explored a lot in the EU books. And it's never explicitly described as like you can kind of like telepathically like on the phone like video chatting with each other, but it's something that like we talk a lot about this with like Harry Potter. When you read something in a book, how it is visually can be very different.
Right.
And so it's just like you said, it's compounding on the idea of what the Force is and what a Force bond can be from the books. But
yeah, definitely. And getting back to the new characters and where they are in this film, we start off with Poe again, and he royally screws up in the first 10 minutes of this film, which I think is probably one of the most beautiful action sequences in Star Wars.
Awesome.
And we get the introduction of Rose Tico, and we see her sister pass away in this fight, this opening dog fight. But like I said, Poe really fails here. He fails as a leader. He fails as a pilot. He messes up big time. And I think that's a consistent trope throughout the film with him, is that he is always failing. And it's probably because he is that hot-headed pilot who isn't patient and probably needs to be, So that's interesting to me, that we dive into that here.
Yeah.
And that he's not someone who's just always doing the right thing and the best thing and always winning.
Yeah.
And then Finn is kind of trying to protect Rey, but he's not with Rey in this film. All the main characters are kind of separated here until that last fight. But yeah, Finn kind of falls back on his Force Awakens shtick, running away. Yeah, which is good. You know what I mean? Like, it's still fitting and still consistent, but that's also been a point of contention.
Yeah, I like that everyone in a way fails.
Yeah.
Like, Poe, like you said, Poe just like Poe sucks, but he just fails a lot. But I like that Finn never felt any loyalty to the Resistance. It was loyalty to Rey and it was loyalty to Poe.
Yeah.
He's like, Leia's cool, but I'm like, we once Finn gets out of the hospital, he's trying to run.
Yes.
And Rey, when she meets Luke, after he's a jerk to her.
Yeah.
She's just like very like the way she delivers. I love Daisy Ridley. The way she delivers those like, well, of course you have to come back and like help the Resistance.
Yeah.
She's just so flippant about it because she's like, well, of course, like you have to do this. And when it doesn't work, she's just so like she's confused.
Yeah.
She's like, you're this myth. You're supposed to do this. So like the main characters are just so like they fail and they try and run. They're not good at what they're doing. I just love it.
Yeah, and that ties into some of what we discussed in The Force Awakens, how Kylo knows these characters and Rey doesn't.
Yes.
So Rey only knows the legend of Luke Skywalker. She doesn't know Luke Skywalker himself, and so when he's not that legend, don't meet your heroes. It's a disappointment. Mm-hmm. And Finn, I mean, where we leave Finn was he was going to Starkiller Base to save Rey.
Yes.
That he was not going there on a Resistance mission. He sort of tricked the Resistance and acted like he knew a lot more than he did, and it was all to save Rey. But I think that by the end of this movie, with the journey Finn goes on, we see him almost sacrifice himself, come within an inch of sacrificing his life for the Resistance. And the arcs in this movie are so good. Speaking on Poe, like going from this hot-headed, like only thinking about the now, only thinking about taking on the dreadnought in that moment, to where we find him at the end of the film, knowing that it's more important protecting the Resistance and fighting in the long run than winning a more hollow victory at the moment. And you kind of get that from Leia, that it's such a great moment when she goes, "What are you looking at me for? Follow him." And he kind of takes the reins and is now really a leader of the Resistance, versus before he was just a pilot who was really good, but wasn't necessarily making those leadership decisions and was more thinking about himself and what he could do in the moment to fight the First Order instead of actually defeating them.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on how all of the characters in this film have such great arcs. And getting back to Kylo and Rey, there's so much building tension for them in The Force Awakens, and after their fight in the forest, things are obviously still super unresolved with them. So we pick up kind of right where they left off in The Last Jedi here, and we see that they actually kind of really relate to each other, And I think that, it's very clear they care about each other. Rey wants to save Kylo in the same way that Kylo wants her by his side, whether that's on the side of light or on the side of dark, but they still kind of want to be there for each other. They don't necessarily want to be fighting. Yeah,
we're on the side of something sort of completely new, as Kylo kind of touches on in this movie. Yeah, for sure. I think that we've all kind of touched on throughout these Star Wars retrospectives. When I watch Star Wars, I don't just want lightsabers clashing. Like, I want character depth, and it makes those giant action set pieces all the more valuable. It's something that we touched on in the prequels versus the original trilogy, where yes, the prequels have this martial arts sort of amazing choreography, but the lightsaber battles in the original trilogy are better because they carry character depth. And something that's been so great about the sequel trilogy is it has both. It has the modern choreography, it has the modern effects, but at the same time, it's still adding that character depth to make those moments feel more weighted and more real.
Yeah. And like what you were saying, I think back, we didn't really touch on it a little bit, but the fight in the forest with Kylo and Rey, they have such different motivations in that fight. Like, Rey is trying to kill Kylo Ren because she just watched him kill Han Solo, and that's like her motivation there. She doesn't know anything else. And then Kylo, like, the second he goes into her head and sees how much they relate to each other, he's just trying to stop her. Like, there's not a second in that fight where he is trying to kill her. And I find it really interesting that, like, the first time they see each other through the bond, she immediately grabs a blaster to kill him, and he's just like, wait, where are you? Like, he's just trying to, like, figure out what's going on with her, and he's not trying to, like, defend himself or hurt her. It's really interesting. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's really interesting.
I love that so much. The Force fight in Force Awakens kind of tells you everything you need to know about what Kylo and Rey's relationship will be in this movie. Because, like you were saying, some people take issue with the fact that she was able to hold her own in that fight. If Kylo Ren wanted to kill her, he would have done it. He literally says to her, "You need a teacher." Like, he says point blank, like, "This whole time I've been holding back." Rey is wildly swinging the sword, and he's just defending himself.
Yeah.
He's just making sure he doesn't get killed to sort of carry on this relationship. Because, you know, Kylo gets split by that moment with Han, and he kind of knows, like, he is so lost in what to do. And then finally Rey comes in, and he sees, like, a different path for him than the one that he's currently on right now. And so good, so interesting to explore those character themes in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something from a technical standpoint that we should talk about with The Last Jedi is the cinematography.
Oh my God.
These are some of the most beautiful shots, I think, and scenes that we've ever seen in a Star Wars film, for sure. And so many iconic shots, too.
Yeah.
The Holdo.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Holdo,
Splitting
the
the-
decimation of that was a dreadnought, right? Or
Yeah.
was-
Yeah.
yeah.
And just
The
silence.
throne room
Yeah.
Ugh.
is still, like, it still makes the rounds on Twitter. Like, I feel like every month, you know, I
Yeah.
see some variation of that scene. And let's talk about that throne room scene, because
Man.
the lead up to it, we're thinking, oh boy, this is just like Return of the Jedi, right? And so we're introduced to Snoke. We're introduced to him in The Force Awakens, but we're seeing him in person now.
Yeah.
In The Last Jedi. And he just, like, talk about expectation subversion.
Man.
He's just sliced in half.
Yep.
Yeah.
Done. Easy. Over. That was interesting. And that's also still a point of contention.
Yeah, I wanted to know more about Snoke.
Yeah.
You know, Snoke, what more do you need to know about
Right.
him? I mean, I think about the original trilogy and what you know about Palpatine, and it is nothing. He uses Force lightning. That's what you know about Palpatine. He's the big guy, the big bad guy behind everything. And you know, you sort of get like a sense that, oh well, if Vader's this powerful character and Vader's kneeling to him and doing his bidding, he must be powerful. But that's all inference. You don't get anything about who the Emperor is. And same with Snoke. He is not there to be one of the main characters of this trilogy. And I think that what we get with Snoke, whereas in Force Awakens he's sort of projecting himself as this giant, larger-than-life villain, and then we see him for real, and he's just a guy.
Yeah.
He's just an old man, you know, sort of physically frail, strong in the Force. And yeah, that moment in the throne room where Kylo kills him, I mean, there are 3 scenes in this movie that are top 10 all-time Star Wars for me, and that is one of them. It's my favorite Star Wars scene, period, because going into this movie, a moment like that with Rey and Kylo, given what we knew about their relationship, was exactly what I wanted. So, like, getting that, I was giddy in the theater.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think that scene speaks a lot to who Kylo Ren is as a character. When Snoke is just like, you know, rhapsodizing about how Kylo is gonna kill Rey and blah blah blah. But what's important is he says, I see into his head he's gonna kill his true enemy. And he kills Snoke, and I think that's something that people really ignore, because people are like, "Oh, he did that so he could become Supreme Leader," and I'm like, "No, he did that because that guy like
Abused him.
for
Yeah.
years, and he killed that guy because he was gonna kill Rey."
Yeah.
And it's never more prevalent to me at the end of this movie, even though he's like Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to lead an
Yeah.
army. Is that he is closer to the light than I think he's ever been, and so yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great thing to say, too, is that at the end of that fight, he definitely is closer to the light than he's ever been. And then he drops down and sees Luke.
Oh my God. Which, like, in retrospect,
Yeah.
right? You see a guy who tried to kill you.
Yeah.
Like what we see about Kylo Ren, like him showing that to Rey and Rey finding out that like Luke essentially created who Kylo
Right.
is. It's
Right.
like it completely retextualized. Like, yeah, Snoke is after Luke Skywalker because he's Luke Skywalker. Kylo Ren is after him because he tried to kill him.
Right.
Like as a kid. And I think that's a huge recontextualization of Force Awakens. It's a revenge mission.
Yeah, and
Like-
it's so interesting because and you just touched on Snoke being Kylo's true enemy, but Luke igniting that lightsaber in Ben's room when he was a kid was the galvanizing moment.
Yes.
Snoke was in his head before that, and that's what Luke saw. But Ben wasn't jetting out to join Snoke before the person that was supposed to lead him and supposed to teach him how to, reject these forces essentially said, "You're not worth saving. I'd rather end it before it begins."
Yeah.
And I think that in that throne room scene, I think that a lot of people think that Kylo's monologue about letting the past die, I think people take that and use it as a criticism on Last Jedi because they don't like the way the original trilogy characters were taken. But I don't think the movie could be more forceful in the rejection of the message of letting the past die.
Yes.
Certainly don't be beholden to your past, and your past does not dictate your future. But we get a visual rejection of that message of Rey not sticking with Kylo, and you get a full refutation of it with Luke at the end of that movie, which, speaking again about top 10 Star Wars scenes, that showdown between Luke and Kylo, which, by the way, is what people said they wanted out of Luke Skywalker. He gets the most insane, powerful use of the Force moment, stares down the entire First Order and does it to save the Resistance. I mean, if that is not just a perfect character beat and the best way to end Luke Skywalker's story, at least while he's alive, I don't know.
Yeah. That whole sequence on Crate is something to behold. I mean, like I said earlier, the cinematography there is top notch. And like you were just saying, that fight with Luke, kind of just Luke with his lightsaber against the entire First Order. And yeah, it's a force projection of himself, but still the symbol of it is what's captivating.
Yeah, and the force projection is an even more impressive utilization of the force because it allows for him to have this showdown, but also distract enough for the Resistance to escape. Because Luke Skywalker knows at this point, after everything he's gone through with Ben, after everything he's gone through here, that he is not going to be the one to save the galaxy this time. He knows he can't do it himself. But he does that, he has that final sacrifice because he knows that the Resistance is the spark that's what's needed to save the galaxy. And I think that that's just a perfect encapsulation of who Luke Skywalker needed to be in this trilogy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the criticisms are that this movie in particular, and even this sequel trilogy, don't pay a whole lot of respect to our original trilogy characters. But like you were saying earlier, I don't think that could be farther from the truth. Because everywhere that we see these characters go makes sense and is consistent and is emotionally gripping and heroic on all cylinders, like with Leia and with Luke and with Han even. They go out in interesting ways. And heroic ways.
I don't think that people should take challenging preconceptions as a lack of reverence.
Right.
The Jedi should be questioned. That's such a great. The moments between Luke and Rey on Ahch-To are so great in sort of questioning this, this series of the Jedi failed again and again and again. Like
Yoda.
That's my other favorite scene in this movie.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into like everybody that hates this movie. Like what you like, don't like what you don't like, whatever. But to act like the people making this movie didn't care about Star Wars when they went to painstaking lengths to recreate a Yoda puppet with the exact specifications of Empire, to have Luke and Yoda have a moment reflecting on teaching, on the Force. Like, I don't understand how you can act like, oh, well, these people just hate Star Wars. Because I think they like Star Wars more than you do.
And I've never, that showdown, going back to that showdown with Kylo and Luke, I've never seen a more explicit scene in a Star Wars film to show how much Kylo's mission in life is personal and not like against the Resistance. One, he can't kill his mom early in the film, which is a scene that definitely needs to be talked about again. And he, like, the second he sees Luke, he's just like, screw the Resistance. We're here for him. And the second Luke essentially like forgives Kylo Ren in this. He's just like, my bad.
Yeah.
Like I did this.
Yeah, that was on me.
That was on me. I'm sorry, dude. And it's huge. That's why I don't understand when people are like, Kylo Ren's gonna be the bad guy in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
I'm like, you didn't watch Last Jedi,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
That's actually a really great point because we shouldn't really get into our thoughts about what Rise of Skywalker is going to be, but
Oh, yeah.
I do think Kylo Ren is going to come out on the good end of this, and fight with the Resistance. That's
Yeah.
what I would like to see. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, but
It's
that's
either that or die.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that's the thing with The Last Jedi in particular is that I think so many people had these preconceived notions of what the film was going to be, and then when it wasn't that's when they started to attack it. But I think if we just watch it for what it is, it really is something amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it be what you thought it was going to be or not.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything in here that betrays the characters, betrays the story of Star Wars, or the mythos of Star Wars in any way. If anything, it improves on it. you
Yeah,
know?
Absolutely.
enhances 100%. And yeah, Kylo as a character, he's not there to be the cartoonish representation of villainy, the sort of binary, like, okay, these are the bad guys. That's who Hux is,
Yep.
and that's who Snoke is, and that's why you see them get punched to the ground again and again, which is awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, I people are like upset that Hux is treated like a joke. He is a joke.
He is.
He's like a Nazi punk. Like,
Yeah. He's
it's
Tarkin.
awesome.
He's-
Yeah.
yeah.
It's awesome seeing him get thrown to the ground and sort of like thrown around. You're not supposed to be rooting for Hux. So like to act like you want all this thematic depth from someone like Hux when people got it from all these other characters and rejected it's weird in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a complaint I hear a lot is that people aren't afraid of Kylo Ren, and I'm like, you're not supposed to be afraid of Kylo Ren. You're supposed to be afraid of the First Order. You're supposed to feel bad for Kylo Ren. I do want to talk about the two of the most controversial figures in Last Jedi is Holdo and Rose Tico. Holdo first, because that's a quick one, I think. But
Yeah, sure.
Holdo, the people who vilified Holdo after this movie came out because she just didn't tell Poe the plan, I'll never understand. They're just so on the side of, like, one, the guy's always right, but two, like, well, Poe's the hero. Like, he's gonna. It's like after what Poe just did, he like just depleted half of the force of the Resistance. She's supposed to tell him what, and then he goes and does it anyway. That's the most important thing I think people forget is that he went and did it anyway, and it's just like.
Yeah, he goes and does this, and he gets the plan leaked and allows the First Order to attack the Resistance in a way they wouldn't have been able to do had Poe not sort of like taken a step back and understood, like, I don't need to be the leader here. Like, if Poe has this trust in Leia, he should understand that Leia was appointing Holdo for a reason.
Yeah.
And of course, Holdo, like, the Resistance is on its last leg here. So if you think there's any chance of a First Order mole or anything like that, you are playing this as close to the vest as possible. So I always thought that made perfect sense, Holdo not informing Poe of the plan, considering he just got half their fleet killed 6 minutes ago.
Yes. Yeah.
And he just got demoted.
Yes. Yeah.
He, like, if you're in a military situation, like, not everybody's gonna know every operation as soon as it's given. Only the
Right.
people with top clearance are gonna understand. And Poe did not have that clearance.
No.
It, like Holdo says, it was one of Leia's last actions to demote him.
Yeah.
And, you know, people are like, oh, well, she just doesn't like Poe. And you see, like, Holdo, like, genuinely really likes Poe.
Yeah.
She just knows he's not there yet. And
Right.
it's necessary for Poe to become that leader.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, if anything, he got off kind of scot-free with
I
that,
agree.
too.
Yeah.
You would think he'd
No
be kind of
blame.
arrested or suspended, something like that.
Yeah.
But no, he's just demoted. And they're like, just,
Chill.
take the bench for a second.
Yeah.
And I think I've always read that, even the first time I saw it in the theater and on repeat viewings, I've always read it as, like, that's the lesson that they're
Yes,
trying to
yes,
teach
Yes.
Poe
Yes.
by not telling him what the plan is. They're trying to teach him just, like, be patient,
Yeah.
you know? I think that's what he had to learn in this film, and I think certainly by the end on Crate we see that he is. He's definitely had that arc, that good arc.
Yeah, and like the I really like when people complain that Last Jedi Poe doesn't line up with who Poe is in Force Awakens. Poe is in Force Awakens for like 7 minutes. But also just like what we do know of Poe from Force Awakens is how he was entrusted with an incredibly important mission, got taken, got out by the skin of his teeth, and survived a dog run. And you're just like, okay, of course he has an inflated head about this.
Yeah.
Like, of course he thinks he's super important. That's why he gets the half of the fleet killed in the first part of Last Jedi. And you're just like, no, this completely is who Poe is. Of course Leia's just like, all right, let's just chill for a second, Poe, because, but yeah, like, oh God. Besides the fact that Holdo was right, I really like the juxtaposition of Poe and Finn to someone like Rose Tico in this movie, because Rose Tico is the hero of the Resistance.
Yes.
And Poe is not, and Finn is not. And I think people need to think about that a little more. Like, Rey isn't even fighting for the Resistance at this point. Like, she's really not. She is by the end of Last Jedi, but, like, she was going to get Luke, and then she's just like, Kylo said I needed a teacher. Yeah. I'm going to go get a teacher. And when that teacher wasn't teaching her, she's just like stuck again. Yeah. She doesn't know what to do. So like Rose Tico is the hero of the Resistance in this movie.
Yeah. And I think that Rose Tico, the journey we see her go on, because, you know, the first thing that happens to Rose Tico in this movie is Paige Tico being killed.
Because of
Poe Dameron. Yes. So we get Paige Tico's death, which is an incredibly emotional scene. I think it's very well done. And then you have Rose, who goes on this mission on behalf of the person that just got her sister killed, who you immediately like understand meant more to her than anything.
Yes.
Was the most important person in the galaxy to her. The guy that just got her killed and the guy that was just trying to desert the Resistance, which is the other thing that she cares about more than anything in the galaxy, is fighting against the First Order. We get her backstory. We know that she was enslaved by the First Order, that she's been tortured, and she shows resilience time and again and fights for this cause. And like you said, like what a hero, number one. And number two, reinforcing that theme of The Last Jedi, that heroes come from anywhere. Yes. They can be anyone. They don't have to be Han Solo's kid to sort of fight on this side. And I think that Rose is so great. All the criticism that's levied on the Canto Bight scene, I think that it's a great like muddying of the good and the bad. It's great commentary on war profiteering. Yeah. Yes. And it's crucial to the themes of this movie and to the progression of Rose Tico. So I think that people don't like the Canto Bight scene because they don't like Rose. I'll just say that right now, but I think it's vital to this movie. I don't think it can be cut out and still work.
Yeah.
And I quite enjoy it. And I think the score work for that scene is great too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a fun scene.
Yeah.
But I think one of the major lines that was kind of always brought up again and again in the marketing of this film was that line from Poe that we are the spark that'll light the fire, that'll burn the First Order down. And to me, and upon repeat viewing, I think that Rose is that spark.
Yes.
You know, on Crate, when she tells Finn, like, you know, you killing yourself is not going to win this war. Love is going to win this war. That to me is the spark right there. Yeah. That's the spark that is gonna,
And that is, boil it down to its very essence, that is Star Wars.
Yes.
So, that moment for me, people think it's cheesy. I don't care. I love that moment with Rose Tico saving Finn. I mean, we get, like we touched on, a great character moment for Finn and sort of a switching of who he's going to be and what his role in this story is going to be. But Rose Tico kind of puts it all on the line to show to him, like, this is how we win. This is what we don't have, and I think that when stories do that, I'm a sucker for that.
I can tell.
There's that moment in Order of the Phoenix that's pretty similar.
Yes, there is.
But
yes, there is.
It's so great to me, and Last Jedi has everything I love about Star Wars in it, and I just, like I said before, like what you like, don't like what you don't like. But stop trying to make me feel like an idiot because I love this movie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that scene at the end is really, like you just said, it's emblematic of Star Wars. Like, I think people think that is like was supposed to be like a love declaration from Rose to Finn because she kisses him, but
Yeah.
I think it's more like Rose isn't fighting for the resistance for Finn. She's fighting for herself and her sister, and Finn isn't fighting the resistance for himself. He's fighting for Poe and Rey and Leia, and it's like you said, it's emblematic of Star Wars as a whole, and it's just like. Love has always been at the root of Star Wars. People just didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're all getting a little teary here.
Yeah, a little bit.
We love The Last Jedi, and I guess let's do some closing thoughts.
Sure.
Right. To me personally, I think this takes everything that The Force Awakens set up and just improves on it in every sense of the word, from a technical standpoint, from a plot standpoint. The performances, I think the newer characters and these actors are more comfortable in their roles, and I love the way that they go and the new directions they take. I think Rian Johnson had a monumental task ahead of him, and clearly the most difficult fan base to try and please.
Yes.
And save for some definitely valid criticisms of the film,
Sure.
there are a plethora of not valid criticisms of the film that I think we definitely kind of broke down here. And I think that Rian Johnson made something really special, and I can't wait for his trilogy.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, you let me go first. I think this movie's a masterpiece. I understand the criticisms that are not valid, but the criticisms that are valid, like I know people have problems with like the pacing and editing, but I genuinely believe that like every frame of this movie is important to the story. The first time I saw it, I cried a lot. I just genuinely think it's a masterpiece, character-wise, writing-wise, the cinematography, direction, just everything about it. I think it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I agree. Last Jedi is actually my favorite Star Wars movie. And I remember going into the theater, I saw critical reactions a few days prior, and they had been mostly positive. So I sort of shut down everything else. I was like, okay, I don't need to read anything else. Wanted to see initial reactions, and then I went to see the movie opening night, and I flat out adored it. And then I went on social media afterwards, and I saw people hating it, and I think I kind of just left the movie thinking like, oh, everybody's gonna love this because it was great. And people didn't, and it was surprising. So then the next time I watched, I was like, did I miss something? Am I gonna? And then every time I revisit it, I'm just like, no, yeah, I was right in how I felt. I truly love this movie. I think that as much as I genuinely adore Force Awakens, I think that this movie just like improves on everything, asks the deep questions. And to Rian Johnson's credit, like if you're going to get the chance to play in this sandbox, like do something that's meaningful to it. Like ask those questions, make those challenges to our preconceptions. And, you know, I just think it's great. Yeah. Last Jedi is awesome.
Absolutely. So that wraps up our retrospective on The Last Jedi. That went so fast, I feel like. We started all the way back with Phantom Menace. Cannot wait for the Rise of Skywalker. Can't wait for episode 9. Really looking forward to it, and you'll be hearing our thoughts on that. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. You can always find us on Spotify, YouTube, anywhere that you listen to your podcasts at Chatting Cinema. I'm Gianni.
I'm Flynn.
I'm Sam. Thanks
as always to Stockton SSTV for allowing us to use the equipment, and thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.